And then we go on tour for another 5 days, and then we have a month off, and we go to Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, Japan,
Hawaii.
Southeast Asia, and then we're home for a little while.
Nirvana's 1992 Pacific Rim Tour took them across Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, and was a chance for them to step outside the typical rock and roll circuit of the US and Europe. These dates were the final 2 months of the initial 6-month-long tour for their second and breakthrough album Nevermind, which by January of 1992 had reached the top of the charts. The tour would end up being the only time Nirvana ever performed in Australia and Japan. Many of the Australia shows were at venues of modest size, which a band of their popularity was quickly outgrowing. It was on this tour of the Oceania region, early on in Australia, where Kurt used his now famous Courtney Fender Telecaster live. This tour was a paradox because on one hand they were all happy with their quick rise in becoming the biggest band in the world, but on the other hand issues were becoming apparent, creating tensions in the band due to exhaustion from months of touring, as well as Kurt's health and addictions. The Telecaster, a Fender Japanese version, was originally a 3-tone sunburst finish, but Kurt, who loved blue guitars, painted the front of the body with blue latex paint. The latex was carved through to the original sunburst finish in a manner revealing a heart and Courtney. Before its paint job, it was filmed for the Come As You Are music video. It originally had a traditional single coil pickup at the bridge throughout this Pacific Rim Tour, although it eventually received a Seymour Duncan Hot Rail single coil size humbucker, a modification that his competition Mustang eventually received as well, and most of the Stratocasters that were destroyed at the end of shows and often rebuilt and used again and again for that same purpose. Following the band's January 11th, 1992 Saturday Night Live performance, Kurt had overdosed from heroin and was found in the morning by his future wife, but luckily he was revived and had the sense to detox himself in a hotel prior to the Australia trip. Nirvana arrived in Australia on the 23rd of January 1992, and the next day they played the first show of the tour at the Phoenician Club on the 24th of January, a sellout show. Kurt started out playing his trusty Fender Jaguar, and the blue Courtney Telecaster was also used quite a bit as well, and would continue to be used regularly throughout the 2-month tour. The next day, on January 25th, 1992, they played at the Big Day Out Festival, also in Sydney, and he also split time with both guitars. Kurt's voice for this show is a little bit raspier than usual, but it still sounds good. I saw in a comment on a recording of this show, someone quoted Ken West, a promoter of the Big Day Out Music Festival. It reads, "Additionally, thanks to some cross-communications, we managed to accidentally video the set. Dave Hawthorne, our video person, handed me a VHS at the end of the night and said, 'You didn't really mean that when you told me not to record it.' I hung on to it for 10 years. I finally gave a copy to Dave Grohl at the 2003 Big Day Out when the Foo Fighters headlined. He cried. Now it's posted online, presumably by him." At this point, after only a few dates in, although they were getting through the shows, the band, especially Kurt, was showing exhaustion, and for Kurt, his stomach problems, which were with him throughout his life, returned in full force. And as a result of this, they played a shortened set list of only 40 minutes in Brisbane on January 27th, 1992 at the Brisbane Festival, and there's no pictures or videos that I could find of this show. On January 29th, they were supposed to play at Metropolis in Fremantle, but it was cancelled due to Kurt's illness. It was originally booked for the old Melbourne Hotel in Perth, but it was moved, before ultimately getting cancelled. On January 26th, they played at the Fisherman's Wharf on the Gold Coast, Australia, and there's very few good pictures of this one. On January 30th, 1992, they performed at the Thebarton Theatre in Adelaide. The show was originally supposed to be at La Rocks, but was moved to the Old Lion and then to the Thebarton Theatre, a larger venue which could house a larger capacity due to a high ticket demand. According to attendees, Kurt was not feeling very well, so Nirvana delayed the concert for about 1 hour. Audio is available for this show, and pictures show him using his Jaguar. The next night, January 31st, they were scheduled at the Palace in Melbourne for the first of 3 straight nights, and according to a member of the opening band The Dolls, Nirvana played 3 songs during the soundcheck, but Kurt did not sing at all. Instead, Dave did the vocals, because Kurt was not feeling well and was having stomach pain. Pictures show the Jaguar, the Courtney Telecaster, and a black Fender Strat with a white pickguard and a hot rail pickup, which would be used throughout this tour and beyond. There's video of this show, and you can see he used the Telecaster for Come As You Are and Lithium, and if you play along with it, you can see that it's tuned to D standard, the original tuning in which they were recorded for the album. And from the audio of the Adelaide show the previous night, I can tell the same occurred there. Although they played Drain You in standard tuning, even though that one was also tuned to D standard for the Nevermind album. February 1st and 2nd were the additional nights at the Palace in Melbourne, and we have some more pics. Where Did You Sleep Last Night was played on February 2nd. On February 4th, at the DY Hotel, the band had to cancel in Sydney due to Kurt not feeling well, and morale in the band was not good. Craig Montgomery, their sound engineer, later stated that these cancellations further heightened tensions within the band. When asked how Chris and Dave reacted to this, Craig says, "There was tension because of that, so yeah, they'd be pissed off at having to miss shows. Days we would cancel a show would be bad." Although Kurt was trying hard to stay off drugs at this time, probably due to his wife now being pregnant with Frances Bean, his stomach pain and the strains of continuous touring started to affect him. Some within the Nirvana group, like Shelley Novoselic, who confronted him and started to question if it was actually the drugs that were causing his pain and issues. This caused Kurt to stress, as he was hurt that few people actually believed that he was clean. Alex McLeod, the band's tour manager, told the author and friend of Kurt, Michael Azerrad, in 1993, his concerns about Kurt during this period, and he was also partly responsible for Kurt's relapse, mistakenly telling a doctor when Kurt was admitted at the hospital that he was still detoxing. This led the rock doctor to prescribe Kurt methadone, which Kurt noted was called Ficeptone in Australia, leading Kurt to incorrectly think that these were stomach pills. The Anu Bar in Canberra on February 5, 1992 was a redeeming showcase of how good Nirvana's live show could be when they regrouped and had a few extra days to properly rest. This is one of the better shows of the Australian tour. Due to the low capacity of this smaller venue, hundreds of people were left out and denied entry, which caused some to try and force their way in. This led to chaos, fights broke out, and doors were broken down, and the police arrived in riot gear trying to control the crowd. This also might be the first show where they tuned to E-flat, or in other words, tuning half a step down for most of the songs, except Come As You Are and Lithium, as they did those still in D standard. The change was likely made to lessen the impact on Kurt's voice. Nirvana would go on to tune at least a half step down regularly on pretty much all their shows and recordings for the remainder of their career. They played all Apologies at this show, which was fairly rare at this time, only playing it at 4 other shows previously in November of 1991 in the UK. The tour of Australia ended with 2 nights at Selena's in Sydney on the 6th and 7th of February, and then they played 1 show on February 9th in Auckland, New Zealand. Next up, they traveled to Singapore, but they did not perform as the management did not secure a venue due to a miscommunication. There was discussion about them doing a free show in a park, but it never came to fruition. Next up, they headed out to Japan for 4 dates, and oddly enough, they were the only band performing for all 4 dates with no supporting acts. Amazingly, there are some audio recordings, but 0 video footage of the band performing in Japan. Dave Grohl stated that the Japan shows were strange because there was a ton of security and barriers separating the audience. And he said they are very strict about the concert goers staying in their seats. On February 14, 1992, in Osaka, Japan, we have backstage footage of Nirvana meeting up with one of their favorite touring partners, the band Shonen Knife, a Japanese pop band whom Kurt was a longtime fan of and who they toured with in the fall of 1990 on their UK tour, and then again for a UK tour in December of 1991. At this show, we can see pictures of a white Stratocaster with a white pickguard which was destroyed, and this is possibly the same guitar that was repaired and used a week later in Honolulu. Next up was February 16, 1992 at Club Quattro in Nagoya, Japan, and somehow we have no pics. The next night, on February 17, 1992, they played at Club Kidda in Kawasaki, Japan, and then the very last Japanese show was on February 19, 1992 at the Nakano Sun Plaza in Tokyo, Japan, for which there is very good soundboard audio recordings of this show. On February 21st and 22nd, 1992, they did 2 shows at Pink's Garage in Honolulu, Hawaii. The Hawaiian trip is often associated with Kurt's wedding, which took place on Waikiki Beach on the 24th of February 1992, which took place 2 days after the final show of this tour. There was a lot of tension within the band. Chris and his wife Shelley were not at the wedding, as Kurt had banned Shelley and some other crew members because he felt they were gossiping about Courtney. Both Chris and his wife were also vocal about their disapproval about her and Kurt's substance abuse. Dylan Carlson, Kurt's alleged friend, flew in to be his best man and brought Kurt some heroin, of which Kurt used, supposedly to avoid getting sick. After Hawaii, Kurt and Chris were not together for 2 months and the band would not perform for another 4 months. In March, the relationships between Kurt and both Chris and Dave were even more strained by Kurt's actions to renegotiate the royalties heavily in his favor, even attempting to make it retroactive. An amended agreement was eventually reached, but things going forward were just not quite the same. Starting on April 10th of 1992, they were supposed to kick off a spring tour in Chandler, Arizona, going through the southwest region of the US, lasting through the end of May. However, the entire tour was cancelled. There would be a 4-month gap from late February until late June once they headed back to the UK and mainland Europe. On June 28, 1992, the Telecaster was used again in Norway, and we have a famous pic of Kurt with it, and you can see his guitar pedals. The Courtney Telecaster eventually re-emerged on January 16, 1993 at the Hollywood Rock Festival in Sao Paulo, Brazil, being bashed into a speaker cabinet at the end of the show. I covered that show a bit in the second High Flyer history video I did, but if you missed it, that show was an absolute disaster. You can see in pictures that the back of the body, now separated from the neck, was actually sunburst and not painted in the latex blue like the front. In 2011, an eBay seller, Record Mecca, offered up what he claimed to be the smashed neck from the blue Courtney Telecaster. According to Jeff of Record Mecca, this broken neck is from Kurt Cobain's blue Telecaster from the Sao Paulo Hollywood Rock Festival. I obtained it from Louis Mathieu, who was the Red Hot Chili Peppers road manager, and Louis picked up the neck off the stage when Kurt threw it towards the audience. Obviously it didn't make it. Anthony Kiedis of the Chili Peppers talks about Kurt smashing the guitar at the festival and Louis coming away with the neck in his book Scar Tissue. Mathieu has said, "I jumped off stage to retrieve it, and as I got back up on stage, Courtney Love was walking by, and I said, 'Hey, you forgot this,' so as to not appear like an overeager souvenir scavenger. She reached out for it and went, 'Aw, thanks.' Cut to years later, I'm at a show and I run into Jennifer from L7 and we were reminiscing about that time in those shows. I mentioned how much I regretted not having held on to that neck. She turns to me and says, 'I have it.' I say, 'What, are you kidding me?' She says, 'No, not at all.' Courtney left it in the corner of the dressing room, and after taking it to Kurt's tech and determining that it was beyond repair, I took it home. She then said I could have it back, seeing as if it hadn't been for me, it would never have been rescued." Alright guys, that's going to do it for me. If you've made it this far, please subscribe, and if you have not already, smash that like button, and I'll see you next time.